It's only procedure, love. My father demanded it. My fiancée forced a prenup, lying that her dad required it though he'd been gone 8 years. She had no idea she activated a clause that made me untouchable and wiped her from everything she believed was hers. Ever been played for a fool, only to realize you were playing the long game all along? The ink hadn't even dried on that monstrous prenup, and she was already laughing. Not nervously, not kindly, but with a smug, chilling glee that told me this wasn't just a surprise. It was her victory lap. Oh, Charlotte. She had no idea that laugh was about to become her very last moment of triumph. Her lawyer, a slick shark named Black, didn't even flinch. He just watched me, probably thinking I was another man about to crumble. They always do, right? At least, that was Charlotte's assumption. I'm sure of it. I'd seen it before, little accidental brochures from Balinese wedding planners, just hints. But this was no casual lunch. This was a downtown skyscraper, a glass-walled office, and Charlotte's left hand flashing the diamond I paid for. That quiet, cruel, utterly self-assured laugh. It was a celebration of victory. Black slid the prenup across the table. Non-negotiable, he said, like it was a cheap menu. 36 pages. That alone told me everything. Love doesn't need 36 pages. Charlotte wouldn't even look me in the eye. Just a quick glance at her phone, then a sweet smile. It's just a formality, honey. My father insisted. Her father? He'd been dead for 8 years. But hey, let's blame the ghost of a failed real estate baron, right? I opened the folder, and there it was, in neat legal jargon, a surgical heist. It didn't just cut me out of any future in her ventures I'd funded when her luxury candle startup was drowning in influencer debt, by the way. No, it gave her full access to my estate if anything happened to me. There were clauses on moral misconduct, lifestyle compatibility, even a dignity threshold. Was that a legal term or new perfume? I honestly couldn't tell. But one thing was crystal clear. None of this was accidental. The plan was meticulously laid out. Drop the prenup, guilt me into signing, rush the wedding before the end of quarter tax report, lock it all down. Black cleared his throat. Of course, your attorney can review it, Mr. Reeves, he purred. But the structure is firm. She is protected. That's what matters. I looked up. For a split second, Charlotte's smile faltered. I've seen senators under more pressure. Understood, I said, and I stood up. No dramatic chair screech, no grand exit. Just the silent, unwavering decision of a man who had already made up his mind. Her eyes widened. Not with panic, not yet, but with calculation. She was recalibrating, trying to figure out if this was a power play or if I was truly serious. I didn't give her the answer. I just walked out, down the elevator, past the valet, and into the crisp autumn city air. The kind of air that tells you change isn't coming. It's already here. By the time I reached my Mendocino home, a deep silence had already settled in. My longtime housekeeper, Martha, had left a note and a French press of coffee. Martha never asked questions. That's why she's outlasted my 2 previous marriages. I just sat in the sunroom, overlooking those cliffs, pouring myself a cup. No music, no news, just silence. The kind you forget exists when you're trapped in someone else's script. That prenup, it wasn't an insult. It was a flag, a signal. Not that she didn't trust me, but that she never had. Not really. I was just a phase, a trophy, a well-preserved, charming ATM. And then, it hit me. I'd never truly intended to marry Charlotte. Not really. I'd stalled the engagement 3 times already. Used excuses like vineyard renovations, estate planning issues, even a bogus waiting period clause tied to my father's will. She either didn't notice, or she just didn't care. But the truth, I was buying time, not to figure out my feelings. I already knew the answer to that. I was waiting for a deal to close, a very specific deal, one that required me to be completely, certifiably, legally single. Because the moment I put a ring on her finger, I would lose everything. And after 40 years of building, of acquiring power, there was no way I was handing it all over to someone who thought estate tax was a type of wine. So I walked away. And that laugh she gave me, that smug, confident laugh, it was the last one she'd ever make in my direction. That night, Charlotte started calling. My cell went straight to voicemail, again and again, until that automated voice simply said, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She later told Black she was sitting on her marble bathtub, towel still in her hair, staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. She tried my office line, disconnected. Her personal email, the one she'd used for years, bounced back. Delivery failed. Domain no longer exists. This wasn't just a rejection. This was an act of disappearance. She called Martha, my housekeeper, faking nonchalance. "Where's Leonard?" Martha, bless her heart, paused. "He's left town." Charlotte, "What? When?" Martha, "This morning. Packed light. Didn't say where." Charlotte, "You just let him go." Martha, he owns the house. Miss Carril. He doesn't need permission. Click. Charlotte just stayed at the wall. That knot in her chest. Not Faye. Not yet. Just that icy recognition that something was not going according to plan. He'll be back. Black told her the next morning when she stormed into his office. It's a bluff. He's trying to regain control of the narrative. They do that sometimes. Bet, she repeated, her eyes narrowing. Black waved it off. Men with assets. They pretend to disappear, let you sweat, then come back with adjusted demands. She wasn't buying it. This isn't some tech bro licking his wounds. Black. This is Leonard. He doesn't bluff. Then what is he doing? She asked him. She didn't have an answer, but the silence wasn't passive. It was strategic. And Leonard, so help her God, wasn't sulking. He was executing. Over the next few hours, she scrambled. My company's accountant, retired. My personal lawyer, indefinitely out of office. My old East Coast partner, dead since 2019. Then she remembered a name I'd once mentioned in passing, Jane Yarrow, a wealth tax advisor. She found the firm. Mr. Reeves no longer requires our services, the receptionist said, dry as toast. We wish him well. Click. Charlotte's hand started to shake. Back in her apartment, she opened the joint management account we'd set up. It was supposed to be symbolic, a place to merge assets, fund joint ventures, and where she'd quietly moved 90 grand of her own capital, hoping to leverage my name for a wellness resort. She logged in. Access denied. She tried again. The password hadn't changed. Still denied. She called the bank. Hi, this is Charlotte Carril. I'm trying to access account ending in 8331. A pause. I'm sorry, the rep said. That account no longer exists. What? It's a joint account. The accounts were closed. All assets transferred. She could barely form the next question. Transferred where? The woman hesitated, then lowered her voice. To a sovereign custodian. We are legally prohibited from disclosing any further details. Charlotte hung up mid-sentence, went to the mirror, and tried to lipstick her expression back into place. But the mask didn't quite fit anymore. Black called an hour later, still trying to sound confident. Is in the wind, licking his wounds. The silent routine. It'll pass. When he does, we'll be ready. But even as he said it, Charlotte noticed something in his voice. Something tight. Unsure. Leonard wasn't playing hard to get. He was removing pieces from the board. And for the first time, Charlotte realized she might have misjudged the one man in the room who never raised his voice. Because a silence like this, it doesn't come from hurt. It comes from planning. Charlotte barely made it to the bank before closing. No makeup, messy hair, just a coat thrown on. She drove like the answers would. Vanish if she hit another red light. The lobby smelled of lavender and printer toner. The manager, a neatly dressed man in his 50s, smiled. A man who, unbeknownst to him, was about to unravel Charlotte's entire future. Miss Carril, he said, pleasant as ever. How can I help? She showed her ID, then a printed statement for the joint account. I need access. I've been locked out. He typed, then paused, frowning. I see. One moment. He disappeared into the back, leaving Charlotte in that marble vault, her heart pounding with every tick of the abstract wall clock. When he returned, he didn't sit. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, he said gently. That account was formally dissolved last week. Dissolved. She blinked. But it's a joint asset for the Vineyard Trust. Leonard and I both. Yes, he interrupted. The original paperwork is here, but the legal structure was updated. Accounts closed under resolution of the primary account holder. But I'm on the account, she snapped. He can't just close it without me. The manager tapped his screen. Actually, he could. You were an auxiliary participant. Signing rights, yes, but not ownership. Technically, you never had custodial privileges. Charlotte's throat went dry. All assets, titles, deeds, liquid capital were reassigned. No court required. Pre-structured. To whom? She croaked. The manager hesitated. Legally speaking, it wasn't a who. The assets were transferred to a sovereign custodian. What does that mean? She whispered. They're under the administration of a public instrument. Specifically, the Public Inbound Trust. Charlotte stared at him as if he'd just told her childhood was a lie. What's that? A legal entity, he explained, designed to manage land resources and asset continuity with the state. Generally philanthropic. Very structured. Very clean. Leonard did this. Yes. Full conversion finalized 5 days ago. 5 days ago, he'd been in Soma with her, smiling at her nephew's birthday. Kissed her forehead when she complained about the sun. 5 days ago. Is there any way to reverse it? She pleaded, her breath short. I'm afraid not, he said. Transfers to public trusts are final. No recourse unless fraud can be proven. And even then, you'd be fighting the State Preservation Code. But it was our account. The banker looked at her like a surgeon might look at a patient who doesn't realize the organ is already gone. I'm sorry, Miss Carril. It never was. She walked out, didn't say a word, just stood by her car in the parking lot, staring at nothing. That account wasn't just symbolic. It was her springboard, her foot in the door to inherited wealth, her leverage. She'd used it in every conversation, every pitch, even with that smug PR woman who'd once scoffed at her credentials. Merging assets with Leonard Reeves, she'd crowed. Now, Leonard Reeves didn't exist in her financial landscape, just a ghost of faded numbers, an irrevocable move buried under layers of pre-signed paperwork she'd never thought to question. He hadn't run, he had rerouted, and Charlotte, so sure of her position, so confident in the illusion of shared futures, was standing in a parking lot holding a statement from an account that might as well have been a phantom. She stormed into Black's office like she owned the very air inside. Her coat slapped the leather couch. Her phone buzzed constantly. Contractors, a podcast producer, old business school friends asking about her partnership with Leonard Reeves on the Vineyard project. She ignored them all. We need to lock down his assets, she snapped. Now, a preemptive motion, an injunction. I don't care how aggressive it looks. Freeze his feet. Black slowly leaned back. He wasn't used to clients dictating terms, but something in her voice must have spooked him. I'll make some calls, he said. No calls, she hissed. Paper. A paper trail. Let him be the one to respond. He did as he was told. Drafted the motion, citing marital ambiguity, financial disputes, pending issues. Legal gymnastics. Charlotte stewed over him like a storm cloud in heels. By afternoon, the motion was filed. Black himself drove it to the clerk's office, confident. He'd done this before. Freeze transitions, stall transfers, create enough friction to force a settlement. But the woman behind the glass scanned the document, then frowned. I'll need a moment, she said. She disappeared, returning 5 minutes later with a binder. This won't be processed, she stated. Black blinked. I'm sorry. She tapped the file. As of yesterday, all parcels previously registered to Leonard James Reeves were moved under Section 9D of the State Preservation Code. What the hell is Section 9D? She asked. Later. Black told her, legislative clause for emergency ecological transfer. For watersheds, forest land, historically zoned terrain, preserved by private donation, converted to state-protected land, non-commercial, irrevocable, tax-exempt. Black's mouth went dry. Transferred to whom? The clerk turned a page. Technically, to the people of the state. Black just stared. The entire portfolio. She nodded. All 11,000 acres. Dated, signed, and recorded yesterday at 10:47 a.m. Fast-tracked with Environmental Council. Black said nothing. He just took the motion, walked into the hallway, and sat on a wooden bench like someone had pulled out his spine. Charlotte was waiting in the car downstairs. When he slid into the backseat, she didn't even look up from her phone. He just looked at his hands. Then, pale, he turned to her. It's gone. What? It's not hidden, not protected, not relocated. It's gone to the state. Preserved, protected. He didn't transfer the estate, Charlotte. He erased it. Charlotte let out a sharp, incredulous bark. He donated it. He didn't donate it. He weaponized it. Section 90 isn't some hippie conservation play. It's a legal fortification, untouchable, and it comes with governor-level public support. Charlotte froze. Wait, what do you mean, governor? He hesitated. The fast-tracking, that only happens through political prioritization. I don't know how, but he leveraged it. She gripped the seatbelt. Can we reverse it? No, it's the states now. Any legal challenge would mean suing the Preservation Board. It would be public, loud, ugly. And you, Charlotte, would be the woman trying to undo a preserved land donation. Her skin went cold. The man who, just a week ago, had been flirting over figs at her cousin's dinner party hadn't just left. He had rebuilt the exit behind him. He hadn't just protected himself. He had made himself untouchable. The next hit came like a paper cut. Small, quiet, but it stung for weeks. Charlotte saw it first on LinkedIn, a post from some junior lobbyist she didn't even follow anymore. Generic header, Governor announces historic conservation pact with private donor. She scrolled past, half-focused, half-annoyed, until 3 words stopped her cold. 11,000 acres. She clicked. No flashy announcement. No press conference. Just a dry legal release that had trickled through obscure environmental blogs. She read the first paragraph. Then again, Governor Jefferson announced a new environmental preservation initiative, made possible by a private land contribution from Leonard J. Reeves. 11,000 acres, now state stewardship, part of the future Green Accords. Charlotte bolted upright. Her phone clattered to the marble floor. She didn't move. Her eyes were glued to the next line. This historic move was coordinated in partnership with the Northbridge Sovereign Fund, which facilitated the estate's transition, ensuring a delay-free execution under Section 9D. Northbridge. The name made her vision blur. Northbridge wasn't a boutique wealth management firm. It was a geopolitical chess piece. A sovereign fund, backed by international players and U.S. governors looking for clean wins. They didn't touch anything below 9 figures. And they certainly didn't partner with civilians unless that civilian had something they wanted fast-tracked. 10 minutes later, Black arrived with a printed copy of the release, a highlighted section, and a look on his face that confirmed her deepest fears. This wasn't a passive loss, Charlotte. This was a tactical broadcast. North, he said, his voice dry as ash. Do you know who they are? She just stared. He tapped the page. They were involved in the Virgin Clear-Out project, that wind corridor legislation in Utah, the tax-free shell that built the tri-state solar buffer zone. She blinked. So, they have a direct line to the governor's office. He didn't need to say the rest. Leonard had just tied his name and the entire deal to a pristine, photogenic narrative. He wasn't a jilted retiree, not a sentimental landowner running from heartbreak. He was now the face of one of the largest conservation conversions in the state's history. A face governors would shake hands with. A name donors would whisper with respect. A man boards would call when they needed a bulletproof proxy deal. Charlotte had thought she was dating a man who collected land like fine wine. She had no idea she was engaged to a walking instrument of state-level influence. Black sank into a chair. This wasn't impulsive, Charlotte. It was coordinated, precise. The moment he dropped that prenup on the table, the chain reaction began. No press, no leaks, just a clean, cold hit. Charlotte picked up her phone. Her fingers moved before she could even think. Leonard, call me, please. Nothing. She typed again. Just want to talk. I didn't mean to. The typing bubble flickered, then vanished. She looked back at the press release. This time, her eyes snagged on. Transfer activated upon confirmation of individual's non-affiliation with external estate claims. What does that mean? She asked, pointing. Black swallowed hard. It means the transfer was contingent on him having no legal ties to you. Charlotte's hands went ice cold. She whispered, so, I was the obstacle. Yes, he said. And he removed you with one word, understood. That moment, she remembered it vividly now. The way he closed the folder, stood up, walked out without a backward glance, as if the meeting had been a mere formality. Because it was never about winning the prenup. It was about triggering the final condition of the real contract. And that contract, it didn't have a name on it. Charlotte should never have been there. Not at that exact moment. Not on that exact floor. And definitely not eavesdropping in the hallway outside Black's private conference room, listening to his voice slither through the door like a snake. She'd arrived unannounced. Makeup smudged, blouse wrinkled, manicured and nails chipped. Less a client, more train wreck in slow motion. She was there for answers. Or maybe just a scream. She wasn't sure anymore. But then she heard it, Black on the phone, whispering. No, the deal was contingent on him remaining single. Charlotte froze. A pause. Yes, that was the clause. He backed out at the last minute, which is why they greenlit it. She pushed the door open, harder than she meant to. It slammed against the wall. Black jumped. The phone clattered. What clause? She demanded, eyes wide and wild. He just stayed at her, as if she were radioactive. What clause? Black. He slowly stewed, running a hand over his tie, trying to buy time, trying to diffuse something that had already exploded. Charlotte moved closer, fury overriding every ounce of composure. What? Clause? He sighed. Then he did something unexpected. He walked to the window and closed the blinds. You weren't supposed to hear that, he muttered. Oh, clearly. But I did. So, you're going to explain it. Now. Black turned, hands open like a priest in confession. There was a condition in the Northbridge transition papers, buried in the back end of the legal conversion. A trigger clause. A trigger for what? For eligibility. Leonard's lands could only enter the public trust if they were free of private encumbrances. Legal, financial, marital. She stared at him. It's part of the sovereign alignment protocols, he continued. Standard for international sovereign fund partnerships. Keeps the estates clean. And you didn't tell me why. He winced. Because you were already in the picture, and I was under the impression Leonard would find a way around it. A loophole. A workaround. But he didn't, Charlotte finished, a hollow ache growing in her chest. He didn't walk away. He did. And when he did, they greenlit it. Immediately. Within hours. Charlotte took a step back. Her knees actually buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Are you telling me I wasn't just excluded? I was in the way. Black didn't answer. She stared at him. Say it. She hissed. He closed his eyes for a split second, then opened them. You were never part of the estate. You were the liability. Silence. Not the kind that floats. The kind that sinks. I planned dinners for him, Black. I made inspiration boards. I met with contractors, architects, zoning people. I gave interviews. And none of it mattered. No, he said quietly now, because all they needed was him. Single. That was the requirement. The last barrier. She sank into the chair she was clutching. And suddenly, she remembered it all. The delays. The postponed engagement parties. Him dodging her suggestion to buy property jointly. His casual let's wait until Q4 about estate planning meetings. They weren't red flags. They were warning signs she'd painted over with optimism and champagne. He hadn't been hesitating. He'd been waiting for the moment she'd overplay her hand, forcing a prenuptial agreement, putting it all in legal writing, giving him the cleanest exit imaginable. And she had handed it to him on monogrammed paper, in a leather folder, with a smile. Black was saying something again, but the words weren't landing. All Charlotte could hear was her own voice from 3 days ago, in that office. It's just a formality. God, the smugness in her tone. She thought he'd bend, that he'd compromise. At worst, he'd argue. Instead, he closed the folder, said understood, and left. He didn't fight her because he didn't need to. He was already halfway out the door, just waiting for her to push it open. And now, the door wasn't just open. It was gone. And behind it, a deal she was never, ever supposed to see. The final, devastating call came at 6:11 a.m. Charlotte was already awake, lying in bed, watching the ceiling fan spin, as if its dizzying rotation could reverse time. Her phone vibrated. She saw Black work. What now? She answered. No pleasantries exchanged. Black didn't bother either. They are reviewing everything. Charlotte sat bolt upright. What does that mean? Your presentations. Your injunction. The motion to freeze assets. All those early partnership claims you made about the Vineyard merger. It's all under scrutiny. By whom? State compliance. Northbridge. Possibly the media council. I just got a call from a risk officer. Someone flagged your presentations as inconsistent with the public narrative. They are worried you're going to go scorched earth and create exposure. Scorched earth, she repeated, numbly. They're protecting the deal, Charlotte, not you. If you keep pushing, you'll be cast as the unstable ex-fiancé who tried to sabotage a generational land preservation deal out of spite. I didn't sabotage anything, she hissed. No, Black replied, but you forced a prenuptial agreement, and that prenuptial agreement triggered a clause. Silence. Then her voice, small now, no longer angry, just broken. So this is my fault. It's not about fault, Black said, too quickly. Say it, she demanded. He didn't answer. Say it. He sighed. You forced the prenuptial agreement. Yes, and in doing so, you gave him legal grounds to exit the engagement. And because of that documented, time-stamped, filed exit, he removed the last barrier to the Northbridge deal. She whispered, he chose the land over me. Black was quiet for a moment. Then he said, softly, no, he chose legacy. The room seemed to shrink. Legacy. She got up, walked barefoot to the window. Below, the city was just waking up. Joggers, dog walkers, delivery trucks. She didn't feel part of it anymore. Everything she had ever built had been loud. Presentations, networking events, social proof. Every step of her career, every relationship, every brand collaboration was built on visibility, on being seen. Leonard had built in silence. While she curated angles and lighting, he had curated exit clauses. While she leveraged names and panels, he had leveraged legislation. While she tried to scale her influence, he was shaping something that would outlive them both. Legacy. The word didn't just sting. It gutted her. She had always assumed Leonard would eventually bend, tire of resisting, and let her fold his assets into hers like a generous benefactor aging out of relevance. Instead, he'd been playing a completely different game. She looked out the window, blinking hard. It had never been about love for him, not in the way she measured it. For Leonard, love wasn't possession, or proof, or even security. It was clarity. And Charlotte? She had become noise. She didn't even realize Black was still on the line until he spoke again. They're going to start rewriting the press around the deal. You won't be in it at all. What do you mean? I mean, they're already scrubbing your name. Emails, photos, mentions. They are framing it as a solo act. One man, one vision. No fiancé, no complications. Just Leonard J. Reeves. Landowner, conservation hero, economic visionary. The words hit harder than they should have. Not because she craved fame, but because he simply didn't need her. Not for the project, not for the image, not even for the win. She had never been part of the plan. Only a phase, a beautiful placeholder, an optional clause. And in the end, when she tested his resolve, when she tried to claim her share in the man, he chose the mountain and left her in the valley. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen for a full minute before she hit call. No answer. She tried another number, a contractor she charmed at the Soma Sustainability Gala, who'd practically begged her to loop him into her eco-retreat concept. She left a voicemail, her tone bright, nailed to a crumbling facade. Hi, it's Charlotte Carril. Just following up on the proposals for the rivulet plot. I'd love to finalize the site design this week. Give me a call. No one called. Not that day. Not the next. By the third silent morning, her carefully curated network of eco-luxury collaborators had simply vanished. The same people who'd sent artisanal bamboo tile samples and hounded her for floor plans were now unavailable. Finally, after a carefully worded follow-up email that felt more like an apology disguised as enthusiasm, one contractor responded. 2 lines. Charlotte, apologies, but we can't proceed. That parcel now falls within the boundaries of the newly designated state park. If we break ground, we lose our license. She read it. Again, clicked the link. He'd included a color-coded map from the State Preservation Office. She zoomed in. The land. Her land. Technically Leonard's. Yes, but the land she'd built her entire new brand around. The cornerstone of her sustainability and wellness initiative. Curated refuge. Farm to table. Nature walks with Instagram naturalists. Gone. It was now labeled Lot 12, Protected Wetland Zone. Do not disturb. A chill ran down her spine as the true scope hit her. That plot wasn't just a location. It was her story. The basis of pitches to investors, startup grants, even a green build panel, digital brochures, a registered domain, a promo video with drone footage and ambient music, where restoration meets refinement. She opened her presentation. Slide 3. Private access to 14 acres of pristine wooded trails. Gone. Slide 7. Projected ROI based on exclusive hotel zoning permits. Obsolete. Her entire presentation now read like a satire. A catalogue of arrogance dressed up in lavender fonts. And the worst part, he never told her. Leonard didn't call, didn't gloat, didn't say a word. He just made a silent move, a land transfer, and watched as the world around her collapsed without him lifting a finger. She called the county zoning office. Maybe a mistake. A clerical error. That area has been absorbed into the state's future green corridor. All permits nullified. New federal standards. Can I appeal? Not for this parcel. It's part of a national environmental fast track. Final. She hung up, opened her inbox, scrolled through hundreds of messages from the last 6 months. Proposals, invitations, follow-ups. So much posturing. So much confidence. All built on land she was never in a position to promise. Leonard hadn't taken anything from her. He just let her build castles in the sand, then turned off the tide. The final humiliation arrived that afternoon, an auto-generated email from a funding platform. Due to a recent jurisdictional update, your project site no longer qualifies for private development funding. Jurisdictional update. That's what they called it. What she called a future, they now called a nature preserve. She closed the laptop. Outside, birds were singing. Somewhere far away, probably on her old plot, a drone hovered over untouched trees, capturing footage for a campaign she would not be in. She waited at the gate for almost an hour. The metal was new. Gone was the ornate wrought iron with the Reeves family crest, replaced by a simple green barrier with a plaque, Northbridge Preserve. Public access begins further on. Please respect protected areas. She hated the font. Beyond the gate, the trees were taller, wilder. No more neat trails. No more landscaping budget. Just forest. Alive, and utterly uninterested in her presence. Then, finally, she saw him, coming down the path from the ridge. Gray hiking pack, mud-stained boots, a quarter-zip fleece over a white t-shirt. He looked like a man with nothing to prove. No audience, no performance, just quiet purpose. Charlotte stepped forward. He saw her, nodded once. No smile, no frown. Just acknowledgement. She swallowed, throat tight, trembling. You knew, she said. He didn't answer. You knew what that prenuptial agreement would trigger. That I would push. That I would put it in writing. And you let me. Still no answer. Her voice broke. Why didn't you just tell me? Leonard looked up at the treetops, his eyes scanning the canopy as if it held more value than their conversation. I was hoping, he said quietly, I wouldn't have to. He took off his pack, reached inside, and handed her a thin envelope. Creased, worn, sealed in a clear sleeve. She took it, hesitated, then opened it with the same dread she used to feel opening rejection letters. Inside, a letter dated 3 years ago. Typewritten, formal, addressed to whom it may concern. Legal counsel, private transaction advisory group. The contents. In the event that my engagement to Charlotte Carril compromises or delays the fulfillment of the Northbridge Preservation Accord, I authorize the immediate termination of the engagement and the withdrawal of all associated joint ventures. No emotion. No delay. The land comes first. Signed, Leonard J. Reeves. Her knees nearly gave out. 3 years ago. Before the vineyard expansion. Before the trip to Costa Rica. Before the birthday dinner where he gave her those sapphire earrings, which she now realized were just a consolation prize for an answer he already had. This had never been spontaneous, never reactive. All of it had been execution. He hadn't just left her. He'd made space for her to disqualify herself. She looked up from the letter, heart racing, jaw tight. He didn't gloat. He just put his pack back on, zipped it, and started walking towards the gate. I loved you, she said suddenly, her voice sharp with the panic of being erased. Leonard stopped, turned slightly. I know. Then why? Because you wanted what I had, he said, finally meeting her eyes. Not who I was. And with that, he walked through the gate. It clicked shut behind him, not with malice, but with absolute, chilling finality. Charlotte stood frozen. All this time, she thought the betrayal was the prenup. But the real betrayal was her assumption that he would sacrifice what mattered most to him just to keep her comfortable. He never had to say it to her face, because the forest already had. It's a brutal lesson, isn't it? About what people value and what truly makes someone powerful. Leonard didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight back. He just planned. And then he executed. And Charlotte, who thought she was so smart, so strategic, ended up being the architect of her own downfall. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would you have done in Charlotte's position? Or even in Leonard's? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.